How's it going, everybody? This is JTech95.
And I'm Travis, sometimes known as Igor on this channel.
Yeah, some of you guys might remember this character. He was in the old 386 video. I had to turn on the machine and he was already sitting there, so I said throw the switch, and he's so wonderfully put.
Yes, master.
Had a few comments referring back to that video as well, so I'm like, you know what? It might be time to make a small appearance.
Yeah, make a cameo guest star.
Pretty much.
So yeah, guys, Merry Christmas to everybody out there. Happy holidays and all that jazz, you know. So I figured, you know what? It's been long enough. It's time to make a video. Ask you guys' opinion. I had several people mention, you know, doing another, you know, video talking about old DOS titles and things like that. And one guy even said, yeah, he wanted to see Igor back. So Igor is back.
Here I am.
So yeah, we're going to be going over another top 10 of our favorite DOS titles. I'm going to do 5, and Travis is going to pick a couple too.
True. Yeah, to be completely honest, I haven't really played too terribly many DOS games in my time, but I do have a couple that I do enjoy from time to time.
So yeah, without further ado, sit back and strap yourselves in. We're going to get started on some DOS games, this time on JTech95. Starting off this list, we'll take a look at Hexen, the sequel to Heretic, which I covered in my last Top 10 video. Hexen was developed in 1995 by Raven Software in conjunction with id Software. The game is set in Kronos, another kingdom that is under siege by Korax, the second of the 3 Serpent Riders, after the story of Desperal's defeat in Heretic. To kill Korax, 3 heroes set forth. One such hero is portrayed by the player. Prior to the ultimate confrontation with the Serpent Rider, he has to pass through elemental dungeons, a wilderness area, a mountainous seminary, a huge castle, and eventually a necropolis during his quest. The option to choose from 3 character classes is a new series feature that was first introduced in Hexen. Gamers can select to play as a mage, a cleric, or a fighter. The game is made more varied and replayable by the distinct weapons and physical attributes of each character. All in all, this is a really fun FPS to play through. The graphics are pretty impressive for the time, and it really does a good job as a sequel to Heretic. I suggest giving this one a try if you have a chance.
Alright, first off, let's take a look at Star Control 2, aka the Urquhart Masters project. Now this eventually became an open source project that can work on a lot of modern PCs and be enjoyed by fans both old and new. It was released in 1992 by the company Accolade Software and developed by Toys for Bob Incorporated. It is an action-adventure science fiction game that's set as an open universe. It's similar to its predecessor in terms of combat systems, but does not contain the first game's strategy-style gameplay. Instead, it focuses on story and dialogue, and if you're playing the original DOS version, be prepared for quite a bit of reading. Your goal as the player is to defeat the evil Urquhart and free Earth from their unrelenting grasp, and you have the freedom to explore the galaxy, mostly at large, checking out different stars and planets and systems as you gather resources needed to fight back. It is a game that me and my siblings used to get into in our free time after our dad introduced it to us. I highly recommend giving this one a good try, as it is quite fun once you get into the story and start exploring.
Next up, let's take a look at Red Baron, developed by Dynamix in 1990 and published by Sierra Online. The western front of World War I serves as the backdrop for the game. The player can fly for the Royal Flying Corps or the German Air Service in single missions or career mode. Throughout the game, the player may fly in the Red Baron Squadron Josta 11, or they may come across him as an opponent from above. You can fly many different aircraft in this title as well, ranging from the Fokker triplane to the Sopwith Camel. If you are a fan of games with planes, or flight simulators in general, I think you'll really like this title. So hop on your doghouse like Snoopy and begin open fire on the Red Baron.
Next up on my list is the game Star Wars Dark Forces. Now this is the first installment of the Jedi Knight series, released in 1995 by LucasArts. And after this one came the famous Dark Forces 2, which eventually led to the game Mysteries of the Sith, and then famously well-known titles such as Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Outcast, and then came Jedi Academy, which both of these can be found in some retail stores to this day. Written for modern consoles such as Xbox, PlayStation, and Nintendo Switch. The story follows the character Kyle Katarn, who is a mercenary employed by the Rebel Alliance after his parents were brutally murdered by the Empire. He had originally been convinced by the Imperials that the rebels had committed the murderous crime, but later discovered that that was a lie and swore vengeance on the evil Empire. Gameplay is very similar to most other first-person shooter DOS titles, such as Doom, Duke Nukem 3D, and others. And if you're both a DOS shooter fan, as well as you love a good Star Wars title, I highly recommend checking this one out. Then, I recommend continuing the series with the aforementioned titles. And I highly recommend really diving into the lore as well as the later titles such as Jedi Outcast and Jedi Academy. Both titles I still revisit to this day on platforms of all types. It's a really great way that the Force can live within us all. May the Force be with you.
For those fans of munchies of the breakfast cereal variety, here's Chex Quest, shamelessly published by General Mills in 1996. This was actually the very first video game to ever be a prize in a cereal box, too. So that's pretty cool, but it makes sense since General Mills published it. What else would they put the game in? Anyway, the game, which is set on the far-off planet Bezoic, follows the Chex Warrior, a soldier wearing a suit of armor shaped like a Chex. He stops the Flemoids from invading the planet and committing serial murder. The Flemoids are a species of slimy green invertebrates that have taken over the planet and taken many defenseless colonists hostage, whom the Chex Warrior has to rescue. He uses Zorchers as his primary weaponry, which very closely resemble kitchen utensils. These weapons transfer his adversaries to their home dimension. The landing pad of the research center on Bezoic is where the game begins. Other stages include the Arboretum, the laboratory, and lastly, the Bezoic tunnels, where the Flemoids have set up their colony. Watch out for the mucus these Flemoids spew at you. It's highly corrosive, nasty, gross, and damaging to the ozone layer. If you would like a fun little goofy FPS to play during breakfast, then I highly recommend Chex Quest. And as they always say, it's full of what you love.
Now let's take a look at a Mario clone, aptly named Mario. This one is a pretty straightforward clone of the Mario Bros. Series that was originally on the Nintendo Entertainment System, originally in the 80s. It was created in 1994 by a guy named Mike Weering using Turbo Pascal for the purpose of practicing his VGA programming skills. He wanted to create a PC title with parallax scrolling layers that would run smoothly on his 486 running at 25 megahertz. Now originally, he never planned on releasing it to the public, but lucky for us, he did. There is quite a few differences between this and the original Nintendo version, such as lack of warp zones, background music, and are well-known characters, Peach and Bowser, who never made an appearance officially. So if you're going to get into this expecting a one-to-one clone of the Mario game that most of us are familiar with, you may be a little bit disappointed. However, it can still be enjoyed for what it is. I highly recommend giving this one at least a try, and worst case scenario, you get a feel for what a DOS-based Mario game title may have been if Nintendo had given the green light for official production. It's pretty decent in my opinion.
Ooh, it's time for Nightmare 3D. This is a horror-themed FPS designed and produced by David P. Gray in 1994. David was also the creator of the Hugo trilogy, which is a collection of games that includes Hugo's House of Horrors, Hugo 2 Whodunit, and Hugo 3 Jungle of Doom. Nightmare 3D tells the narrative of Hugo, in which the malevolent Dr. Hammerstein has abducted Hugo's girlfriend Penelope to employ in horrifying experiments. In an effort to save her, Hugo must fight his way through Hammerstein's strange home, caverns filled with labs and jails, and then a warped alternative universe full of aliens and demons. In all honesty, this game isn't scary at all, but it is pretty interesting and can be fairly enjoyable to some. I personally find it charming and quite a fun time to play through. And the soundtrack is pretty great as well. Why don't you try it out sometime if you haven't already? It's to die for.
Up next is Command & Conquer Red Alert. This is one that isn't technically my favorite, but if you know about the mobile games such as Clash of Clans and Boom Beach, then you may be familiar with the basic structure of the game's mechanics. It was developed and released in 1996 by Westwood Studios for MS-DOS-based PCs, and then later ported to Sony's PlayStation console in 1997. It is a real-time strategy game that takes place in a parallel universe at a site known as Trinity in the state New Mexico in 1946. It covers a time period where Albert Einstein is developing a method of time travel where he meets a young Adolf Hitler. After a drawn-out course of events, Einstein's time machine experiment ends up causing a timeline shift where the USSR grows in a terrifying rate due to lack of Nazi Germany's rise to power, which is explained more in the game. The goal of the game is to pick your side and develop a swift and brutal boot to the opposing faction. Again, you can build different structures for both offense and defense, similar to the familiar game StarCraft. Now, this isn't my most favorite game in the DOS area, but if you're a big fan of top-down RPG game styles, then I can recommend you give this one a try. It's pretty cool if you ask me.
Let's now dive into another great FPS title, namely Rise of the Triad. Developed and published in 1995 by Apogee Software, originally this was going to be a follow-up to Wolfenstein 3D, but was later altered to be its own standalone game. The basic storyline is as follows. You are investigating some dangerous cult activity occurring in an old monastery with a group of elite agents called the Hunt, High Risk United Nations Task Force, and are dispatched to San Nicolas Island. You quickly discover that the cult intends to systematically destroy neighboring Los Angeles when patrols wreck your boat, which is your only means of escape. You and the other agents are then left to battle their way into the island's monastery and ultimately put an end to the cult's operations once and for all. This game is pretty good, but can be very difficult when it comes to hit scanners and overall enemy firepower. But after some practice, it can quickly become a favorite in your FPS collection. I highly recommend trying it out. It's pretty awesome.
For my final game in the lineup, we'll dive into the game Alone in the Dark. Now, I've dabbled with the original Game Boy version a bit more with this title, but this is one that can leave you scratching your head from time to time. But good thing we have YouTube in case we get stuck, right? It was first developed and released in 1992 by Infogrames along with Chrysalis Software, and was ported to countless other platforms including the aforementioned Nintendo Game Boy, as well as many other consoles and systems such as the Sega Saturn, 3DO, PlayStation, and Dreamcast. You play as Edward Carnby, a private detective in the 1920s who has been hired by an antiques dealer to investigate the Dursato mansion after a suicide and several other strange and unnerving occurrences. You must fight against a whole assortment of dangerous and terrifying creatures and other despicable forces as you search for clues to solve puzzles in your attempt to investigate the various happenings within the mansion walls. This is a good title to check out if you're into the mystery/horror genre. It can be slightly unnerving at points, similar to games like Resident Evil series, but is still very interesting and enjoyable if you want my personal opinion. And all I can say is, watch your back, watch your footing, and try to keep your head.
Well, guys, that's our top 10 list DOS titles that we like. Another 5 that I enjoy that didn't make it into the previous video. And about 5 that he likes too.
Yeah, around there. Some of you may be familiar with them, and some of them may be new to you. But something to check out.
Absolutely. I haven't played a lot of Dark Forces, and after hearing your opinion of it, I think I'm going to be playing a little bit more of it. I've played it a little, but you've played it more than I have, so
Yep.
I think it's a lot of fun. It reminds me of Shadows of the Empire to an extent, which makes sense. I mean, they're made by the same people.
Right.
Yep. Well, anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Comment and subscribe. Hit that like button if you liked what you saw today. And yeah, just subscribe if you like seeing retro computing content like this. I'll try to get this guy out of his cellar a little bit more often so we can collab a little bit more. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Catch y'all later.
Later.